Okay, so have you ever like put down a game and just thought like, wait a minute, was that actually fun?
Yeah.
Or was I like expertly manipulated?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like that time I totally rearranged my like entire schedule so my virtual crops wouldn't die in a game.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, seriously, who have I become?
Right.
So that's exactly what we're exploring in this deep dive today.
Okay.
The sneaky side of game design.
I like it.
We are going to be looking at an article called Exploitative Game Design, Beyond the F2P Debate
Okay.
by Edward McNeill. It's from like 2013.
Wow.
But honestly, it's scary how relevant it still is today.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think we often just like accept these manipulative tactics in games, sometimes even praising them as clever design.
Totally.
But, if you saw those same tactics used in other areas of life, you'd probably think they're pretty shady.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like imagine a used car salesman using like the same tricks to get you to buy a lemon.
Oh, yeah.
You would be outraged.
Totally.
And that's actually the analogy that McNeill uses to illustrate what he means by an unethical exchange. It's not just about like whether you agree to buy something.
Right.
It's about whether both sides are actually getting a fair deal.
Exactly. And McNeill argues that games should be held to the same standard.
Okay.
Just because you're having fun doesn't mean the game isn't taking advantage of you.
So how do we even know if a game is being exploitative?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, McNeill breaks down several techniques that, let's be honest, a lot of games use.
Yeah.
And the first one is all about our good friend loss aversion.
Ah, loss aversion.
Yeah.
That feeling of dread you get when you think about losing something, even if it's something small. Games tap into this big time, making you feel like you're constantly on the verge of missing out.
Oh, tell me about it. Like those games where your progress is constantly at risk.
Yes.
If you don't log in every day.
Yep.
They're like banking on you feeling that pressure to keep playing, even if you'd rather be doing something else.
It's a classic case of FOMO. The fear of missing out being weaponized by game designers.
Yeah.
And another clever tactic is using those "you've unlocked a new item" notifications.
Oh, yeah.
They create a sense of excitement, but really it's just a way to tempt you to spend money to actually get that item.
Ugh, I know. It's like they're dangling a carrot on a stick, making you chase after something that's just out of reach.
Yeah, and sometimes that carrot is attached to a slot machine.
Oh, boy.
That's where variable ratio rewards come into play.
Okay, explain that one to me.
Yeah.
I'm not a big gambler, but I have definitely lost hours to those Match 3 games.
Yeah,
You know?
totally. Think about it this way. Variable ratio rewards are basically random rewards.
Okay.
You don't know when you're going to get them or what you're going to get. That's what makes them so addictive. You keep playing, hoping for that next big win, that next dopamine hit.
Yeah, it's like they figured out how to hijack our brain's reward systems.
Totally.
I mean, some level of randomness can be fun, like in a roguelike game or a deck-building card game. But when it's tied to spending money, that's when it gets tricky.
Exactly. The key is whether the randomness is serving the gameplay or serving the game's monetization goals.
Right.
And speaking of feeling rewarded, have you ever played a game where you're constantly leveling up, unlocking things,
Yeah.
but it feels kind of hollow? Like you're not really progressing, you're just being showered with meaningless rewards.
Oh, yes. I'm picturing a mobile game with 1 million daily quests and login bonuses right now.
Yeah.
You're constantly getting stuff, but it doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah.
You're not getting any better at the game. You're just being kept busy.
That's what McNeill calls excessive extrinsic feedback. It's like the game is trying to distract you from the fact that the core gameplay loop might be pretty shallow or repetitive.
It's all smoke and mirrors, basically.
Exactly, and it preys on our desire for validation. Even if those rewards are completely meaningless,
Yeah.
they still trigger that little dopamine hit in our brains, making us feel like we're accomplishing something.
So it's like the game is giving you a sugar rush, but it's not actually nourishing you.
Totally.
Okay, this is getting interesting.
Yeah,
But we've only just scratched the surface of McNeill's techniques.
that's right.
What else does he have in store for us?
Well, we'll have to wait until next time to find out.
Stay tuned.
So welcome back to our deep dive into exploitative game design.
Okay, so last time we were talking about how some games really exploit our natural desire for rewards, even like the meaningless ones. But the manipulation doesn't just stop there.
Right. Oh no, not even close.
Have you ever felt like a game was almost like designed to make it hard for you to understand
Yes.
how much you were actually spending?
Yeah, like they don't want you to realize how much that one tiny little purchase is actually costing you in real world money.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like it's all about those premium currencies.
Yeah, those gems and diamonds and gold bars, whatever they call them.
Yeah.
It's all designed to like abstract the real cost, making it harder to actually grasp how much you're really spending.
It's like they're trying to disconnect you from the reality of your spending.
Yeah, it's almost like casino chips, you know? They feel like play money, but they actually represent real cash.
Sneaky, sneaky.
And it gets even worse when you combine that with like constantly inflating prices.
Oh, yeah.
Or those weird bundles where you never quite know what you're getting for your money.
It's like going to the grocery store and seeing that the price of your favorite snack has gone up for no reason.
Right.
Except in games, they often make those price hikes even more subtle.
Totally.
So you don't even notice until you've already spent way more than you intended.
It's death by 1,000 microtransactions.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. It's not just about sneaky design choices. Our own brains are kind of wired in ways that make us vulnerable to these tactics.
Oh, no.
Remember loss aversion? Well, it's often paired with something called restraint bias.
Okay.
We tend to overestimate our self-control, thinking we can handle just one more purchase, even when we know deep down we probably can't.
Ooh, restraint bias. That's me every time I tell myself I'll only spend like $5 on this gacha.
Right.
And then end up dropping 50.
Exactly. And then to like make ourselves feel better about those bad decisions, we engage in post-purchase rationalization.
Ooh, I like that one.
We twist ourselves into knots justifying why that purchase was actually a good idea.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like, well, I've already spent so much time on this game. What's a few more bucks? It's like we're trying to protect our egos from the reality of our spending habits.
It's a vicious cycle. Games exploit our biases, we make bad decisions, we rationalize those decisions, and then that makes us even more susceptible to exploitation in the future.
It's a trap.
It is a trap, but don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Now that we're aware of these techniques,
Okay.
we can start to spot them and make more informed choices about the games we play and how we spend our money.
That's where McNeill's tests for ethical game design come in handy.
Right. Totally.
It's like he's giving us a toolkit to evaluate games for ourselves and decide, like, are they treating us fairly?
Exactly. He poses a series of questions that encourage us to, like, critically examine our relationship with a game.
Okay.
Like, looking back, was it really worth the time and money you spent on it?
That's a great question. Because sometimes we justify spending way more time or money on a game than we should.
Right.
Just because we've already sunk so much into it.
Totally.
You know.
It's that sunk cost fallacy in action.
Classic.
And another powerful question he asks is, did you feel like you were paying to play more of the game or to skip the hard parts and play less?
Ooh, interesting.
Sometimes paying to bypass a grind or a challenging section can be a totally valid choice. But it's important to be honest with yourself about whether you're actually enjoying that shortcut or just feeling pressured to keep up.
Okay, this is making me think about all those times I've paid to skip ahead in a mobile game. Sure, it saved me some time.
Yeah.
But did it actually make me feel good about it? Not always.
Right. It's about recognizing that those shortcuts can sometimes undermine the very things that make a game enjoyable in the first place.
Yeah.
And speaking of spending, McNeill also challenges us to ask, were you always clear about what you were buying, or did the game make it hard to think about the real cost?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Those confusing bundles and premium currencies can be a real mind bender. It's like they're intentionally trying to make it hard for you to understand how much you're actually spending.
And that lack of transparency is a huge red flag. If a game is being deliberately vague about its pricing, it's probably because they know you wouldn't make the purchase if you knew the true costs.
Right, think of it this way. Would you buy something from a store that didn't have price tags on anything?
Exactly.
Probably not. I'd be pretty suspicious, to be honest.
Right. And that same level of scrutiny should apply to games as well. These are all great questions to ask ourselves as players, but McNeill also challenges developers to consider their own ethical responsibilities.
Okay.
He argues that developers should always strive to ensure that the player's encounter with their game is mutually beneficial.
So it's not just about making a fun game. It's about creating an experience that respects the player's time, money, and well-being.
Yeah.
It's about creating a game that's a win-win for both the player and the developer.
Exactly. And that leads us to some of the objections and counter-arguments that McNeill addresses in his article. Because, let's be real, not everyone agrees with this whole ethical game design thing.
So next time, we'll be diving into those thorny debates.
Oh, yeah. It's gonna get good.
Exploring the complexities of ethical game design and why it matters.
Stay tuned.
All right, so we've been talking about exploitative game design.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's really got me thinking twice about some of my own gaming habits.
Yes, for sure.
But I know there are some people out there who think this whole conversation is a bit, like, overblown.
Right?
You know? Like, aren't games just supposed to be fun? Who cares if they use a few sneaky tactics to keep us engaged?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, fun is subjective, right?
Mm-hmm.
What one person finds enjoyable, another might find totally manipulative. But I think it's important to distinguish between feeling like you're having fun and the actual long-term impact a game might have on you.
Okay.
Remember McNeill's used car analogy? Just because the buyer feels happy with their purchase doesn't mean they weren't taken advantage of.
That's true. It's easy to get caught up in the moment
Totally.
and not realize how a game is actually influencing our behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where ethical game design comes in. It's about creating games that are both enjoyable and respectful of the player's time, money, and well-being.
But what about free-to-play games? I mean, those are free, so isn't it kind of fair game for them to use whatever tactics they want to make money?
Well, McNeill actually argues that even a free game can be exploitative.
Okay.
If it wastes your time or manipulates you into spending money you wouldn't otherwise spend.
Interesting. So it's not about the price tag.
It's not about the price tag. It's about the intention behind the design.
So a free game that respects the player's agency is more ethical than a paid game that's, like, full of dark patterns.
Absolutely. And even with like the best intentions, game developers are often under a lot of pressure to monetize their creations.
Oh, for sure.
That's where having a strong ethical framework becomes crucial.
Right, because I don't think most game developers are setting out to create games that are intentionally harmful or anything.
Yeah, of course not. But as McNeill points out, even with good intentions, we can still create systems that have negative consequences. It's like the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right. And sometimes those negative consequences are driven by a reliance on data and a pressure to squeeze every last cent out of players.
Okay, but isn't that just kind of the reality of the gaming industry? It's a business, after all.
That's a common counterargument. But McNeill challenges us to consider a different perspective. He says, if I don't exploit players, someone else will. And his response is simple. We don't have to contribute to a system that we believe is harmful.
So it's about taking a stand for what we believe in, even if it's the harder path.
Exactly. And that's what makes this conversation so important. It's about raising awareness, challenging the status quo, and striving to create a more ethical and sustainable gaming industry. Ultimately, it's about recognizing that games have the power to shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And with that power comes a responsibility.
So what can we do as players? Like, how can we make a difference?
Well, the first step is awareness. Now that you know about these techniques, you can start to spot them in the games you play. And the next time you're about to make an in-app purchase, ask yourself, is this something I genuinely want, or am I being manipulated?
Right. And if you're feeling pressured or manipulated by a game, don't be afraid to just walk away.
Totally.
There are plenty of other games out there that will treat you with respect.
Exactly. And if you're a game developer, think about how you can incorporate McNeill's tests into your design process. Ask yourself, am I creating an experience that is genuinely beneficial to the player?
So it's about moving beyond a purely transactional mindset. And creating games that are both fun and ethical.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even a new perspective on the games you play. Until next time, happy gaming and stay aware.